and say welcome again to the AAPT Coffee Hour. I'm Mark Hannum. I'm the K-12 Program Manager and somehow the de facto host of the Coffee Hours. We've been doing this now for more than a year, and I got to tell you, I was reflecting back on how I ended up in this hosting role, and I honestly can't remember how this played out. But I've enjoyed the last year, and I think this has been one of the best things that we've done here at AAPT to bring people together in these informal ways and to really start to bring that community out that has always been there, but has only sometimes been present at these annual meetings that we have. So it's been wonderful, and it's always wonderful to see everyone stop in. So there was Philip. If you don't mind me starting with your question and to call you out on it since you are here, I think you had a great question, which is, we've spent an inordinate amount of energy over the last 12 months really hyper-focused on building online investigative lab experiences for students. And now we're looking at a near future of the fall of a lot of students back face-to-face at both the high school level, at the university level. Is there any place in next fall's curriculum for all the online labs that we spent hours and hours and hours putting together?
This is a hilarious question since I spend 11 hours a day thinking about this.
My opinion is that we're going to have some online courses because we were starting online courses before the advent of the pandemic. We're better at it now, but the students by and large have expressed a desire, at least at Illinois State, to be together and visit with their friends. It's not a whole lot to do with the classes per se, in my experience, which is not the experience of the entire United States or the entire world, but students at Illinois State have expressed a preference for hanging out with their mates. And so I think there will be some, because we've had some online classes, and University of Illinois is also doing online courses, or partly online courses, for foreign students who cannot get to the United States. So there'll be some application of it, but I don't think there will be as much. So
Franchette, am I saying that right? I hope so. You have a comment? Oh, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
How about now?
There you go. Perfect.
So I have spent a lot of time thinking about that question because of the sheer number of hours, because for 32 physics sections, I'm the only one creating the labs. So I'm like, I want my work to be meaningful. And I have decided that I am going to completely alter my approach to teaching when I return to campus. We're not returning until the winter, and there's some talk we might not return until the summer. So I still have some time I can utilize my labs, thankfully. The whole department will be utilizing them. But when I do return to campus, I intend to completely alter the lectures now to include a lot of the kits that I've been using on campus. Because one of the things I've learned by teaching these labs online, we have a mix of using kits and Pivot Interactive. So we've been going back and forth between those, and the students have been enjoying the experience. But what I have learned is that our labs that we have are too sterile. They're set up to turn out to be good, to have good results. And with the kits, it's not sterile. I mean, they're dealing with real life problems. They have to address real life issues. and they have to think. And I like the fact that they're not working in groups. I think that's one of the best things I have, because they too often depend on that one really good student instead of participating. And so students are actually, I think there's a lot more learning going on since we've been online with the labs. So what I'm going to do is change the lecture to be more involved and hands-on with the kits that we have with the labs we set up, but I'm not going to call it a lab. It's just going to be the lecture experience where as they're learning, they're doing. And since we have enough kits for every individual student, that there's no, they can't rely on somebody else. They're going to be told, you have to do this yourself, you know, so it'll be in-class exercises now. So
I love the idea of beginning to blur the boundary between lecture and lab. That seems like a siloing that we've been traditionally stuck with, that if we were really free to create, we wouldn't have that, right? We could just blend. Okay, right now you're going to do a lab. Now you're going to explain something. Now you're going to work as a group. Now you're going to collect more data, right? Just weaving that into all of our instruction would be so nice.
A thought that occurred to me when you started, when you talked about Francette, when you talked about having each student have a kit and all doing their own work, is we've spent, let's say the PER community as we've spent an awful lot of time pushing collaborative learning and active learning, a lot of which involves groups and getting better learning that way. So how does that factor in? Essentially, it sounded kind of like you're now separating so that the students won't be working together.
yeah, and it's intentional, but they're still going to be working together in lab though.
Okay.
So the collaborative effort is not, I'm not getting rid of that, but students have become too dependent on it. And so I think, and our labs are sterile on top of it. So they're too perfect. And with the kit labs, things just don't go perfectly all the time. And I like that, you know, critical thinking that has to occur on the spot. And, you know, I'm not going to tell you ahead of time what issues you're going to encounter, because I need you to be done in exactly 2 hours so my next class can come in. So I'm going to arrange the lecture to be to allow a little more open-endedness for students to be able to deal with problems. And if a student can't individually deal with their own problem, then it's something we can discuss as a class together. So that portion of the collaboration isn't going to go away, but I think students learn better. You know, it's like the person learning to walk. You know, you can describe how to walk all day to somebody until they take that first step. They're not going anywhere. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, is give them that first step in the lecture. And then when they go to lab, maybe they feel a little more confident in what they're doing and are willing to participate more and not be so reliant on the other people.
Francetta, did you say what level these labs are at?
All of the labs that I've been doing this with are both introductory and the advanced level. We're at community college, so calculus based.
Okay, so both.
Yep, both.
Gary, you have a comment?
Yeah, just we're a bit behind the US on vaccinations and so on in Europe at the moment, and you know, difficulties with 1 or 2 vaccines at the moment that are emerging that are probably not difficulties at all, are going to slow things up further. So I think we'd be quite pessimistic about being able to populate labs fully come September. But there are a few things about running online labs that have come out. The first thing is that by and large, we've found that students don't like them. They don't like working on their own isolated. Somebody brought up the thing about socialization and people working together, collaborating together. It's a question of working closely enough with people that you get comfortable working with them. So you're happy to share, you're happy to think, you're happy to make mistakes in front of them, and that requires personal contact. So I don't think we can separate the two. Like, there's a difficulty always with labs anyway, that you ask what's the purpose of them, and it's a question I think we don't ask ourselves enough. And a common answer you will get from people in physics departments is that it supports the theory sections of the course. It supports the learning of theory. It doesn't. There's one or two very good studies that have been shown that it doesn't do that. It does other things. It teaches students skills that they can't pick up and things that they can't pick up elsewhere. It shows them where they can apply, they can apply physics in real life situations if you do it properly. It helps them with, data analysis and things like that. But it doesn't support understanding generally of development of concepts. Simulations very often are better at that. So I think, we need to think about like one of the purposes or one of the usefulness pieces of a lab, or getting students in working together, getting students in with close contact with faculty as well. And I think we need to be careful not to lose that. And that's the big thing that I'm hearing from a lot of student representatives. I'm sort of heavily involved in a couple of university committees, and the student representatives, the student union education officer, is continually telling me that students feel very, very isolated at home. It takes them a lot longer to do things. They get caught up in stuff very easily, and it's maybe one of the danger of kit type labs or other things like that they can fairly easily get in a panic about it, and there isn't somebody immediately there that they can turn to that will give them a bit of reassurance. So there's a lot of thinking to do, I think.
That's excellent. Thank you. That rang all my bells. Thank you.
That's been our experience as well. The students hate the remote labs. And not only do they dislike them, but I have noticed, and I was having a conversation with one of the professors that I co-teach the introductory lab with today, our students are stumbling over relatively simple concepts that historically they have found very easy to pick up on in person in the past.
Yeah, I'm curious though. I mean, my students in doing some remote labs, they're clearly missing that richer experience of the hands-on thing. But I haven't seen them concerned about the collaboration side of it. In fact, the further we get into this and the more fluent my students are getting with video conferencing technology and things like that, then I'm finding that they are initiating Zoom meetings and Google meetups and things like that outside of class hours on their own to get work done and to talk about labs. And it's been interesting in that it's very informal, right? I'm not in the room, I'm not watching it, I don't know what's going on, but I know that they're doing it, and I know they're finding it very valuable. And I know that the frequency of it is going up as they just kind of being in this environment is now completely fluid for them, right? It's not a scary thing anymore.
Do you think this is something they would not do in person if they were on campus?
I think that they will continue to do it on campus, because thinking back to when I was undergrad, the trek across campus to meet with my lab partners was daunting, even though it was only like 100 yards. I was fundamentally lazy. But if I could just turn on like Zoom and be like, hey, I'm not going to walk over there because it's cold out. I'm going to stay here and work. I think this could happen. I also think this could happen in high schools too, in that, the high school that I work at, the students are geographically, it's not a neighborhood place. Kids are kind of spread out. And in years prior, it was actually very difficult to assign group work that didn't occur at school because it was impossible for them to get together. And I actually am now discovering that the ease at which my students are working together online.
What size?
A question for Eric. Sorry, if I could, Eric, you mentioned your students hate online labs. We have not found that. And I'm curious, like my daughter in her chemistry studies at her college, an online lab was 2 hours of watching somebody run an apparatus and then sending an Excel spreadsheet. She hated them. And that's clearly not the only way to do online labs. So I'm curious, what are you doing?
Well, we're doing two things. For the introductory lab, we're basically doing that, except that the demonstrations are shorter than that. They're 45, 50 minutes. And yeah, the students hate them. We looked into being able to send them hardware to try and do something at home. But in order to duplicate the content that we wanted to, it would have been thousands of dollars worth of hardware to ship to each student. And we have 65 to 70 students per term. So it was just prohibitive for us to send them the hardware. For the advanced lab that I teach, this term I have 5 students. And so I did send them hardware. And they were able to do a lot of their experiments at home, which is nice, but they're still missing out on an awful lot of experience that they would get in person. And the seniors are more appreciative of the projects we have them do at home, but they recognize that this is only a small fraction of what they could be doing in a well-equipped laboratory.
Paul, you've had your hand up for a minute.
Yeah, so I appreciate what everyone is saying. I recognize all these things in my own class. I would say that we're getting mixed results from our students. We're actually doing surveys and we're asking students what they like and what they don't like, and we're getting both. Students say they like the simulations better than the in-person labs, but there's a strong group, a large group of students who also say that they miss the hands-on. We're doing both, actually. We have simulations. We did half simulations, and we've done half at-home DIY projects. And in fact, they don't have to run their own project until the last term, this spring term. The other projects are written like the old labs were, where we tell them what to do and try and guide them through the process, but they do have to find the equipment, build the apparatus, that kind of thing. Very, very similar to what we would do in class, just the equipment is totally different. But, you know, instead of coming to the cart and picking up the things they need, they go to the kitchen or the garage and find whatever they need. What I was going to say was that our university is really excited about this possibility. So we're definitely looking forward to fall back to pre-pandemic conditions. And in that environment, the university actually reached out to our group and asked us if we needed more money to make better online labs. You know, now how often does that happen? They're seeing the potential for delivering something that previously none of us would have suggested we could do, you know, which was have a physics online, because the lab can now be done online because we've done this development work. And they're looking for bringing in other people, not students who came to the university already thinking they would get in-class instruction and pushing them online, but attracting people who might not have considered the university because they're exclusively looking for something online, but they, or that just appeals to them. Students have been asking for basically online versions of everything for a long time. Now that we have it, they're seeing some of the drawbacks, but they're also seeing some of the benefits.
So as a little bit of an extension of that, one thing that I've been curious about is all of our budgets are constrained, and we have to make wise choices about the actual physical devices that we invest in. Has anyone found whether it's a simulation of a lab that you could never have afforded the device for, or maybe even as far as like an Internet of Things, like direct access to a thing that you never could have afforded for your department, but you have now found this to be a valuable access that you never would have been forced to look for or develop in the first place?
For us, I have 32 sections of physics that I'm coordinating, and I was able to purchase the individual kits for 100, we have over 300 students through the CARES Act. And I would never have had access to be able to do that prior to this event. So the CARES Act has been my lifesaver. And because of that, I have access to stuff now. I'm like, yay.
We are doing some simulation lab that our students are happy, and we really think what they are doing, they really understand the the basic of the physics that they're supposed to learn, especially in physics 2, for the electricity and magnetism. But the thing is, something that always makes me worry is that when the students are doing the simulation, there is nothing goes wrong with it. Or beside the simulation, the instructor also take a video of the real experiment in the classroom and give they can see exactly how the device looks like and what is the data. They can collect the data and follow the instruction and answer all of the questions, fill up the spreadsheet. But what makes us worry is that this will be, everything is perfect. Like if we give this to a student to do the experiment, they make mistakes and they learn from their mistakes. But during the simulation or when we send them their video, they don't have that chance of learning from their own mistake. That's something that they're missing.
Jake?
Yeah, I've been doing online work. I was an instructor, professor, and then retired and came back, and my whole life for the last almost 10 years has been online learning. Of course, it's been informal. I can remember a youngster saying to me, talking about online experiences versus being in hands-on situations and simulations. He said, you know, Jake, I like going to fireworks shows, but I'd much rather light the fuses, you know. And I kind of kept that in the back of my mind, that when you go into a lab, other than just the chances for error, besides hands-on, it's the smells and the aromas, the sights, all the sensory experiences of being in a lab are very important. And it reminds me of, my other hat is in Hollywood, and why do people still go to movie theaters when you can watch every movie at home? You know, you can watch every movie, but there's something about going to the theater that makes that well, anyway, I just wanted to say that before I forgot it. At my age, I forget what I'm going to say, so I got to get it out quick.
We've actually found with our online labs that we have more opportunity to have students explore when things don't go well. So one of the things our early research looked at was different types of errors and different types of directions that students could go where they would realize they made a mistake. And we realized that, and I'm sure all of you know this, is not all mistakes are equally useful, right? They can waste a bunch of time and learn nothing from it, and they can make really, really interesting mistakes that will stick with them. And we found that with online labs, not necessarily simulation based so much, but video based, that we can get through the simplified model quickly and then give students more time than they would normally have had to say, what are the limits of this? When does it work well? When doesn't it work well? And so it's been interesting. There's been no question that we've gotten farther in depth in our labs, specifically in that, exploring the limits of simplified models than we were able to before. Yes, but not with simulations. Generally, simulations don't allow students to do that. It has to be real data.
I feel like we've also been talking a lot about these online labs and online materials and materials that we sent home as being you know, a replacement for what's going on in the lab. So part of my question was a little bit of the assumption that next fall we would have access to those in-person tangible labs again. And I'm really interested in having the conversation about, is there anything that's going to stick with you from this year that's going to be added on top of to reinforce or to enrich the things that students are doing in person?
Yeah, very much so. we have introduced 2 different curricula that the students could do at home, and it's just introducing them to software. We have, for their introductory lab, we have a unit in how to program or how to typeset in LaTeX. It's a very small part of the course, but the students apparently they want to learn it. They've never had the opportunity to learn it in a formal setting before. They really appreciate that. I think we're going to stick with that when we come back in person. And in the advanced lab, we've been teaching Labview, which again is a very useful skill. And I think we're going to stick with that. We're going to add that on to what we will be doing in person. I'll float this, and then maybe we can come back to it after we're done with this discussion. But this flows from the question, what are we preparing our students for? What role do we see them taking on after they leave our class? And I have a very specific mental model for that, and this moves them in that direction.
Yeah, I think that is it's a very important question, which is, if this pandemic changed everything, the way that we learn, the way that we teach, the way that we work, what is the future that we're preparing our students for now? Did it fundamentally change the way that work gets done? Is there new calculations? Are there new paradigms that they need to be able to operate in? And do we need to reinforce them in the way that we teach now?
Well, one thing that we did was we really took advantage of the time to the redesign time to do some changes that have been waiting, right? So we still were doing, prior to the pandemic, what you would call a cookbook lab. And I don't have to tell this group why that's not great. And so we added a lot more things that we always wanted to do, but there wasn't the time to redesign the course. And while we had to write basically a new curriculum, those things just got in. So they're doing a lot more uncertainty analysis, design work in the development of their own projects leading up to a final project, like I mentioned, where they pick the topic, design the experiment, and do the experiment. And those were always things that we had wanted to do, and we'd actually experimented with them a little bit, but this really propelled us. So going back to in-person class in the fall, those will stay. Those labs that we wrote for in-home, we're going to try and keep those in the course. It'll be either a hybrid course where we leave them as they are now, where students just literally do them at home, and we switch the simulations back to the original ones that we had, or we do something in lab with better equipment that is the same DIY kind of thing, So I think we've gained a lot by thinking through those curriculum changes. Those will stay. I'm excited about that.
I'm going to pick up on something that Gary put in the chat about the students not turning their cameras on. One of the things that I think that we need to encourage with the students, and we try to do this, is Zoom skills. Because they're going to be doing this. They're going to be having virtual meetings in the future. And turn your computer on, clean yourself up, choose a background that, works. I think that these are job skills, and the students will need them even once the pandemic is over.
When you said the pandemic, excuse me, I interrupted. The pandemic is over. We do we did before the pandemic, about 5,500 live school shows a year. We've got 15 teams that go around the country doing science presentations and stuff. And of course, we had to shift everything to online. And our sponsors, Ace Hardware and 3M and stuff, they're suggesting that the pandemic is not going to go away necessarily, because there'll be other flus and viruses that are going to, or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, that we're going to have to step back into the online mode occasionally. Like we might go back to the lab to live shows, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later I've got to shift back to the online. So we're building that into our plans, that if Fauci comes on and says, hey, no school, we're ready with the online stuff immediately. So I think that's going to be with us the rest of our days anyway. It's just being ready for this shift from live to online.
Yeah, my students, I think their biggest fear about school next year is the absence of snow days, and that, if anything, what this year has done is it has obliterated the concept of a snow day, because if there's a snow day, we just have class online that day. And this is possibly the most depressing thing in their life right now.
So just a small interjection there, because so being from Texas, we had a little bit of snow and ice back in February. We actually had a week and a half of no classes because power was so disrupted. That was an extreme thing, but there may still be conditions, a school can cancel classes, if weather is inclement or something. It doesn't mean they all go away.
There'll be no energy days though, instead of snow days.
There may be, nobody has power days.
No one has
I had a few students in Texas that I had to say, no, you can turn your work in a week late because you don't have any power. You don't have internet. But it was only a few. It wasn't everybody, because they're spread out across the country.
Well, it used to be we had to trudge through snow 3 miles to school in bare feet. Now it's going to be, oh my God, we have no internet. What are we going to do? Oh my God.
And that was uphill both ways, right?
Yeah, it's uphill both ways. Now it's we don't have internet, or it's slow. A slow computer. Oh my gosh, how can we live?
Phil here.
Actually,
hope you don't mind me interrupting. I was the one who asked the question originally, and I'm honored that it was chosen for discussion, and I'm hearing some great things. What I kind of meant by it, amongst other things that have been addressed, is yes, let's assume you can go back, you can do a lab. Is there a situation where you would choose to do, say, a Pivot Interactive lab over doing one in person in the laboratory? Because, well, partly because you put a lot of work into it, and perhaps because it works. I'll give one example that will make our Pivot Interactive person happy. The coffee filter drop. My students got much better results and a much better physical understanding about air drag by having videos that were nicely curated, having axes that would scale themselves automatically, and so on. So it took that burden and that stress off them, and they could concentrate on the fact that the drag force goes as the speed squared, which was the whole point of the lab, as opposed to trying to fit a straight line to everything, which is what they really want to do. So it was nice that they could actually focus on the physics, as opposed to being worried about, oh, the video camera and the frame rate, and now I got to read it into the computer, and my lab partner didn't do a good job measuring the points and so on. So for that lab, I might actually take a sick day and assign the Pivot Interactives one. Oh, don't tell anyone.
I'm going to say yes, there are absolutely times when a remote interactive lab is going to be preferable over a hands-on lab. And this comes back to, what are we preparing our students for? To go back to what Mark was talking about at the very beginning of the coffee hour, if you're working at JPL on a Mars rover, that's all remote. So if we can teach tools or skills that are useful in doing that kind of science, and it doesn't have to be Mars rover science. It can be accelerator beam science, where you're sitting in a control room completely separated from the experiment. If we can teach the students useful skills in those environments, then yeah, I think absolutely we can prefer that over sealing wax and string, as they say. Doesn't replace it, but adds to it, complements it.
One, unfortunately, we heard about the CARES Act giving us money and allowing to expand a lot of things. But one thing that I'm actually starting to hear a little bit at AAPT is that counties in their K-12 education systems are getting very nervous about funding for next year, and they're scaling back their workforce a little bit, which is going to obviously increase class size. And I've had some conversations with teachers about now if they have a whole lot more students in their class, that the online labs or simulations are just going to be more efficient rather than the setup and the takedown, or the quick turnaround from one class, one period to the next class, the next period, which is a different thing, but you have all the equipment in the room still. So they're looking forward to this idea of one way of handling an increase in class size is to lean on some of their new online skills that they've been developing.
Are there other high school teachers here? I'm sorry that we didn't talk about that in the beginning. Mark and I? Okay.
I was one, but I got therapy, so I'm all right now.
I mean, that's right. As an aside, for a high school teacher, that's a lot of the reasons that Pivot Interactive exists. You have 150 students a day and 40 minutes of prep time, and you're going to try to do labs in your 3 different classes. Like, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I think personally, I'm in my role at AAPT, but also just kind of a member of the larger physics community. I'm a little nervous about local school board decisions around physics teachers. And there's been this gigantic upswing in the number of high school students that are taking physics, mostly because of AP Physics 1 and 2, which has been a grand success as far as getting students into taking physics. So there's a quadratic increase in the number of kids taking high school physics. But if you look at the number of high school physics teachers, that is not increasing. And now all of a sudden, if it starts to get clamped down, I'm very interested in what's going to happen with the workforce of high school teachers, but then how they handle labs, how they handle all of this. And I think there's no way of predicting what's going to happen, particularly predicting across the entire country. That's always a silly proposition to predict how different school districts in different states and different regions behave. But even beyond the normal uncertainty of it, I think it's going to be, the next 12 months will be very interesting to see what happens.
I hope that that's not the direction that the country goes in, that this K through 12 community goes in. As someone who teaches students at the introductory college level, who's coming right out of high school, I can say I would much rather teach a student who had a close and relatively personal interaction with a good high school physics teacher than someone who was part of a 300 student class and did a lot of simulations. I think, and this is something that I'm trying to think of what would be an appropriate venue for advocating for this. We need more K through 12 physics teachers.
Sure.
And as a college teacher, I'm saying this, and I would say write your congressman or something, but
yeah, absolutely. And the programs like PhysTech have been marginally successful at getting more people interested in teaching physics. But the biggest growth area right now in people that are teaching high school physics are people that are coming over from other disciplines, where as there's this increase in the number of students that are taking Physics 1, the increase has been great, but it hasn't been a big enough increase to warrant a full-time physics teacher. So it's been a part-time physics teacher, which really means the chemistry teacher gets some extra duty. or the math or the calculus teacher gets some extra duty. And those people are doing yeoman work by jumping in and taking care of this, and they're doing a great job. But we're kind of stuck in that unfortunate transition period where there's been great growth, but there hasn't been enough growth to actually kick off a big hiring frenzy of physics teachers around the country.
So just to weigh in on that problem a little bit, I mean, there are some things out there that probably just need better exposure, more exposure. I mean, one is the Get the Facts Out program, you know, just to undergrads. Absolutely. To let them know, like, this is a thing you can do. And, you know, it's not, you know, a horrible paying career, you know, it has a lot of opportunities. But two, also, it'd be nice to see more interaction between universities and in-service teachers, you know, for these people who are coming cross-disciplinary. Yeah, I'm in Texas, I know of 2. They serve a grand total of 50 teachers per year, which is tiny. It's about 1% of our, you know, physics teachers across the state. They'll never close that gap on their own. But if there were more programs, like I think Indiana or Illinois is starting one, yeah, we need more of these. And then also, honestly, just going to your state, like science teacher conferences, offering, you know, workshops or, you know, sessions on like, you know, a topic or something, and just blurring that boundary between K-12, you know, physics teachers and college physics teachers, I think would do a lot for people who come from biology, from chemistry, and have to teach physics or choose to try and teach physics.
Yeah, you mentioned Get the Facts Out, which is a great program, by the way. One of the other things that I manage. So I'll admit that, yes, I'm part of that program. But it's really producing really good materials for university faculty to use with their students to talk about, you know, a career of teaching physics. And one of the new resources that we have developed is, if you're interested in understanding kind of the financial landscape of your particular geographic region, you can email the Get the Facts Out people, and they will send you a full report of, you know, what is the average teacher income in your county or three neighboring school districts, what are average home prices, what's the cost of living, and they do some comparisons of, you know, if you're an incoming teacher, what type of thing can you afford? And it's now become an interesting little side service that we've started to offer as a essentially just a data mining system. But also, I will point out too, the PhysTech program has a very good state-by-state report card. Which I'm putting in the chat, which tells you which state university systems are producing enough physics teachers for the job market in that state, or at least the demand for physics teachers in that state. This was another thing that PhysTech actually recently revised and updated kind of their data mining processes, as well as how they do some of these calculations.
A little bit of history, Mark. In 1958, you'll love this. Mr. Wizard, who I worked for 20 some years, Don Herbert on television, was talking to President Eisenhower, and they were desperate for physics teachers. And he asked him, what can we do? And Mr. Wizard said, oh, I've got the answer. It's absolutely will work, guaranteed. He said, what is it? Triple their salary. It'll take care of the problem. That didn't happen. I don't know.
Well, it is possible that teacher salaries have tripled since 1957.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Yes. Okay. You never want to debate with a physics teacher. Yes.
The problem is it took since 1957 for that change to occur, right?
That's the point. Yeah.
I'd throw cold water on its side. Inflation adjusted, I would say those salaries have probably gone down.
Yeah.
Since then, especially if you compare them with housing prices, housing, education.
Sure.
Well, you'll get a kick out of this. The year I first started teaching was I won't say what year, 64. I was going through the files, and there was the teachers from 50 that year, 57. His salary was $3,500 a year, and his classroom allotment for spending was $3,700 a year plus a $15 lab fee. And all that lab equipment that was on the inventory was all made out of rosewood and brass. And you know, wow, he had his own salary to spend on, you know, stuff. And it certainly has changed.
And I bet you could buy a house in that area at the time for $5,000.
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 Not even twice his salary.
Oh, I think physics teachers were gods in 1958. It was just the way it was. I don't know.
So we have 10 minutes left, and there was one other topic that I was thinking about asking everyone today, and this is entirely because it's prompted because I'm as I mentioned at the beginning, currently across the street from Kill Devil Hill, where the Wright brothers took off, and you know, this week with the Ingenuity lander on Mars possibly taking flight, but even also in the recent kind of public conversation about muons and the breaking down of the standard model, it really also got me thinking a little bit about how do we, what is our responsibility, if there is one, to bring up current science in our classical mechanics classes? You know, in our introductory physics courses that we're teaching, do we have any reasonable expectation to talk about the breakdown of the standard model with recent develops of experiments with muons or flight on Mars, or you know, what's the well, how do you talk about current science to beginning physics students? How about there? That's the most concise way of saying it.
Just as a thought, I think that makes a great, you know, conceptual or open-ended question for a lab final. You know, why does this matter? You know, or why is this a big deal? Maybe give me a little more context about, you know, the history of the discrepancy. See what students do with it. See how they interpret it.
I always bring stuff up to my students, even online. I've been doing it. I send it out by announcements and stuff like that. And I always provide a background and how it relates to anything we have learned recently or anything. And I usually end up having that. I can't make it long because they're not going to listen. It's got to be short, to the point. It's got to be interesting. Videos help, like, you know, a 2-minute video, nothing longer. And when I do that, it tends to generate a lot of questions. And so my students are interested in stuff like that. I actually sent them an email because I asked, you know, and asking them that question about 3 weeks ago, because I have been giving them posting information about the International Space Station when a good time to view it when it passes over our area. And I've just been sending out the schedules without really, you know, wondering if they want to see those schedules. And I've been sending out other interesting things, just like you said about the helicopter. I told my students about the helicopter on Mars. And so I said, you know, am I wasting my time, guys? Is this something you really want me to do? You know, I don't want to fill your email box up with, you know, nonsense if it's bugging you. And they were like, no, we love this stuff you're sending. So they are interested, I think. But I think it's how we present it is really important. If I were to give all the physics behind it, they would not be so interested. But just give them enough of a teaser for them to be like, oh, well, what about this or that? And, you know, does that correspond with what we just learned in class? That type of thing. They seem to like that more, at least my experience. and they definitely love the helicopter on Mars. And it's so easy to relate to everything we're learning too. So they really like that.
I wonder, is there a wider discussion in it a way? It's not just about new things. It's about very often students, and particularly in introductory physics classes, see physics as a collection of equations. They don't see it as a collection of concepts, a collection of, don't see it as an overall integrated framework. They see equations, whereas we see concepts. And the other thing too is there's a very real danger of them as well, seeing physics as very mathematical, very precise, that it developed the way it was because it's the way things are. Whereas, sort of most of the big discoveries, in fact, were made because other things were happening at the same time, because maybe the time of the discovery had come with technology, or the time had come with thinking in other areas, maybe maths being developed, or maybe, you've some very dreadful events like World War II inspired a lot of very good physics afterwards. Like radio astronomy would be an example of something that took off after it. And that's one of the more pleasant, using one of the more pleasant technologies in it. But so what I've been trying to do for a number of years is maybe have a blog associated with courses, where I'll post maybe an article every week or two. I tend to recycle them a lot from year to year. And there's a lot of very good stories and very good narratives in it. And you get things like, the muons coming up, or, other things that students enjoy hearing about. Some of my colleagues, what they do as well is each of the asynchronous lessons they're preparing at the moment, what they'll do is part of that, they'll have maybe a 1 minute or 2 minute video that they're described as maybe picture of the day. And they'll have something, as one of my colleagues, I'm pretty sure, is that they'll have the helicopter and ingenuity, on it. I'm pretty certain of that. And students love it. They absolutely lap it up.
I'm thinking about my own experiences when I was a student, whether I was reading something or watching a educational television show, that we didn't have the web back then, or YouTube, versus talking to a professor or a high school teacher when I was in high school. The ones that I remember the most are the ones that were communicated one-on-one, face-to-face with a human being. And so I think, yes, absolutely, this is a very useful thing to do, but I think it is best done in person, with a real personal relationship with the instructor, which comes back to why we need more K through 12 teachers. I don't have any supporting literature to say that students retain more when they're in a conversation with someone, a real live human being, than they would if they would see something on a YouTube video, but I'm pretty sure it exists.
Did that person you had that relationship with, that physics, did he have a beard?
One of them did. My chemistry teacher had a beard. My physics teacher did not. He was clean shaven.
Just a private survey I was just taking.
I think one of my, thinking back to, like Eric, thinking back to my early career as a student, and maybe I'm showing my age here. I think my first scientific event that really got me triggered on, wow, science is cool, was when I was in elementary school and Halley's Comet came around. And for some reason, the buzz around Halley's Comet and that kind of scientific event, that still rings very loudly in my memory of a child, of being exposed to a current science thing that absolutely just turned me on to the idea of, wow, science is real. And this is also, the irony behind this is that my father, the only job he ever had was he worked at NASA. And even having that near person exposure still never got me excited about science until Halley's Comet came by. So I wonder if, things like ingenuity or things like muons or any other current science thing it's hitting that switch for a kid, even if they have that near person experience.
My experience was with the Bunsen burner. First time you light a Bunsen burner, you're a caveman. I was ready to jump up on the lab table and beat my chest when I got that thing to go. You know.
Interesting. It's something that with sort of freshman students that I would do quite often. Again, it's one of these blog articles, and what I do is just recount what got me interested in science. And I'm dealing with students that aren't going to, most of them aren't going to major in physics. Most of them are going to major in biological science subjects, in fact, at the end of the day. But again, like everybody, there's personal stories, and I said mine was, I remember as a kid watching these ghostly pictures of people, sort of literally bouncing and hopping around the moon, and wondering why they were bouncing. Sort of absolutely amazed the idea that this thing I looked out in the sky that I knew was so far away, that the technology was there, the science and engineering was there to put people there. So that was probably what triggered a lot in me. But I had a really fabulous high school mathematics and physics teacher, and a very good chemistry teacher as well. And really, it was, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing today was really down to the two of them, and down to them cultivating an interest that I had. And the funny thing is, the physics teacher was very subtle in the way in which he did things. Like, he gave us a loan of books, and I remember, again, way a long time back, Nigel Calder had, I think it was a very good series called The Key to the Universe, and it was talking about particle physics and talking about things like color. And he loaned us he'd buy the books himself and he'd loan them to us. He'd run electronics club on a Saturday morning in the school, and all of these things helped. But as well as that, he was a very good teacher. He didn't drill stuff into you. He let you discover stuff. He encouraged you to try things, and that's what I think the importance of a high school teacher, a good high school teacher, that's both competent, but as well as that relates very well to people. I don't think it can be underestimated or overestimated. Sorry, I mean, say it's usually very, very underestimated.
People who study such things will recognize that science is inherently a social practice. And what you're describing and what we've all talked about is the socialization. And I think you lose that tremendously when you go to very large class sizes and you don't get to know your teacher on a personal level.
Last 2 weeks ago, there was an AAPT National Academies workshop that I sat in on about underserved minorities and why certain groups were doing so poorly in advanced math and physics. And I don't know if any of you participated in that or not, but the scientist that was presenting the data suggested that it was the kids that were dropping out of physics and math classes were dropping out because they didn't have any buddies in the classroom. They didn't have any personal interaction. They were trying to study first year calculus by themselves. And that'll scare you to death right there. If you have, especially if you don't have a good teacher, if you have a marginal teacher, yeah. I thought I'd bring that up. I guess nobody else.
Mark.
I'm glad you were able to make that workshop, by the way. That was a hard ticket to get. That those tickets filled up very, very quickly with a waiting list that was twice as long as the number of participants they had. So
really,
yeah, it's.
Well, it's because I had the beard. It was the beard. I'm telling you, that's what it is. That was wonderful. But the reason I enjoy these coffee sessions so much is the people that come are so kind and courteous and fair and everything that they're trying to get us all to do. In that workshop, I felt a lot of anger and tension, and I don't feel that with this. That's one of the reasons I loved physics teachers. They're never tense.
Yeah. Watching a lot of my coworkers deal with a classroom full of people that don't turn their camera on has definitely raised their stress level. But I agree with you. I think physicists are generally even-keeled folks. But with that, I also should say that I think we've come to the end of our time, mostly because I have to quickly run out and watch the sunset over the bay on the other side of the Outer Banks before it goes down. So I have a date with my wife for the sunset, so I got to run.
Your sun is setting over land, not over water then.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's setting, there's the space of the water between the Outer Banks and the shore of North Carolina. So there's a little bit of, there's some water there.
Do you get water on the horizon?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Where we are. Yeah. We're far enough away from land that there's no land on the horizon.
Watch for the green flash.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I've seen it twice actually. First time was in Santa Monica when we first moved to California, and I took my wife and young son, and we were coming back off the beach, crossing the road over the bridge, and the sun was going down. This was in January. Sun was going down behind the water, and I said, "Oh, just out of curiosity, there's this phenomenon called the green flash." And I explained it to them. I said, most people looked at it for their entire lives and they never see it. And I said, let's just watch and see if it happens. Well, the atmospheric conditions were just perfect, absolutely dead still, inversion layer and everything. And the sun sinks and sinks and sinks. And just before the last limb went, it turned bright emerald green. It was just brilliant, like a laser pointer. And I start jumping up and down on the bridge. It's happening! It's happening! The green flash! The green flash! And my wife and son looked at me like, "What are you so excited about? You said it would happen." So watch for the green flash.
I will look for the green flash.
Thank you very much, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great talking to everybody. Thanks again, and be back in 2 weeks, back at the earlier time slot.
Thank you, Mark.